Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it is spoiler announcement day. We got so much spoiler news. Wizards just did a sneak peek stream talking about Warhammer 40k, Double Masters, and a little bit about Dominaria. Got a bunch of preview cards, not from Dominaria, but from the other sets, and some of them are pretty sweet. So we're gonna break it all down. Before we do, two quick reminders. Number one, if you need some new Magic cards, you can get them from our amazing sponsor Card Kingdom over at cardkingdom.com/MTGGoldfish. Number two, if you want to keep up on the latest spoilers throughout the day, you'll find them all over at MTGpreviews.com. You can sort them, you can filter them, all that good stuff. Anyway, let's talk exciting new Magic news. So first off today, we got the Warhammer 40k Commander decks. 4 of them, along with some secret lair drops. And we'll talk about the new cards in just a minute, but I wanted to mention the product quickly because we actually got a release date and it's a lot sooner than we thought. We thought it was the end of this year, and it's actually coming out in August. Previews start the end of July, as you can see here. In August, we'll actually get the set release, and this is a little different than a normal release. We're getting 4 commander decks, but for the first time ever, we're actually getting 2 versions of each of those decks. There's the normal version, and then also a collector's edition version. So don't know what they cost. I assume the collector's edition based on booster packs is going to be way more. Like if the normal version is what, $50, $40, but whatever. I expect that the collector edition is going to be 4 times that, maybe, based on collector boosters versus normal boosters, maybe even more than that. Maybe this is a $200 commander precon. So it'll be interesting to see if anyone buys the special version of the set. We're also getting 3 secret lair drops that are releasing essentially at the same time, the same week in August as the decks themselves. So that's the release coming up fairly soon this summer. So let's talk about the new cards. So I will say, I don't know a ton about Warhammer 40k, so I'm going to look at these as Magic cards more than flavor cards. If there's some sweet flavor of these cards, let me know in the comments. But first up today, we got Abandon the Despoiler, and I think this card's going to be a pretty popular Grixis commander. 5 mana, 5/5, legendary Astaris warrior. It has Trample, and it has Mark of Chaos Ascendant, which is just a new flavor word. That means during your turn, spells you cast from your hand with mana value X or less have Cascade, where X is the total amount of life your opponents have lost this turn. This card is bonkers. As soon as I saw it, it reminded me of Yidris, and Yidris is a super powerful commander. This is the second commander that we've seen that essentially, if you do something, can just let everything you play from your hand have Cascade, which is super powerful. Every spell is going to be 2 spells. Every creature is going to be 2 spells. You just go through your deck at lightning speed, and it gets really, really insane. Also reminds me a little bit of like Rakdos or Nihab, these commanders that reward you for damaging your opponent, because that's what Abandon wants. And at first glance, you might think, okay, well, isn't this just bad Yidris? And I don't think that's exactly true. The big difference is how these cards trigger. Yidris, if you want all your stuff to have Cascade, you need to play Yidris, and you need to get in combat damage with Yidris. So you gotta find a way to give it haste, you gotta wait a turn. Abandon, a little bit more mana, but it's gonna be a little bit faster because all it cares about is the amount of life that your opponent lost. So this means a couple of things. You can build a board of creatures and then play Abandon and attack with your creatures to deal a bunch of damage, and then all of your stuff's gonna have Cascade because you're gonna have dealt a ton of damage. You can also turn it on with direct damage, Comet Storms or Lightning Bolts, whatever, things that just damage your opponent, exsanguinates, anything like that's going to get the job done. So while maybe it's worse than Yidris, maybe not, it is definitely different, even though the end result is going to be the same. Like, if you build your deck right, everything you cast from your hand is going to have Cascade, which is super, super strong, and really everything having Cascade, you don't even really got to build around it, honestly. Like, sure, you can build around it and try to play a bunch of other Cascade cards or something, but really all you want to do is cast a bunch of spells. One of the most popular ways to build Yidris is kind of a Storm style deck where you're just casting rituals and casting frantic searches. The more spells you cast, the more times you Cascade, the more spells you get for free, the more value you generate, the more likely you are to have this crazy turn and win the game. Also, shout out to the free spells. These spells are really essential to any sort of Cascade commander deck because they're 0 mana. So the trick here is you play your Inevitable Betrayals or Wheel of Fates or Glimpse of Tomorrows or Ancestral Visions or Profane Tutors, and even though they technically don't have a mana value, you can still cast them if you Cascade into them. So this means you can have these be the only 0 mana non-land cards in your deck, and you know when you cast a Brainstorm or a Ponder or whatever, you're going to end up hitting one of these super, super powerful spells that normally you got to wait several turns to cast. So those are going to kind of be the staples of a deck like this. If you want to go more rogue with this and not focus on the Cascade thing, it is a warrior. Grixis warriors aren't really a thing. The only other legendary Grixis warrior I could find is Cedrus, and Cedrus is really like a Graveyard Hunter style commander. so it could be fun if you want to take a janky tribal route to build around it, but really, I think this is a pretty busted Cascade commander. It reminds me a lot of Yidris. Whether or not it's as good as Yidris, we'll have to wait and see, but this is a really strong card that I think a lot of players are going to build around, and this certainly isn't some watered down, not very good commander card. Like, this is a legit strong card that people are going to play and play a lot. We also got Blood for the Blood God, a new 11 mana Rakdos instant. It says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. So even though it's 11 mana, you can get it down to 3 mana technically if you have 8 creatures die. And then it lets you discard your hand, draw 8 cards, and then it deals 8 damage to each opponent, and then you gotta exile it. So essentially, you wheel away your hand, even better than wheeling, you end up with 8 cards and deal 8 damage to each of your opponents. That seems like a pretty powerful effect. So the question with cards like this is, how consistent will it be? Obviously, if 8 creatures died, this card's absurd, busted, one of the best cards that you can play. On the other hand, if nothing's dying and it's 11 mana, there is a chance that it's going to get stuck in your hand a lot. So it works really well with Abandon. I would say Abandon, if you can get it to trigger and get the cost of Blood for the Blood God down, this is going to give you a really expensive spell that can cascade into essentially anything in your deck. So you can kind of see the direction that Wizards is going there. I think the easiest way to make this card work is probably Wraths. Like, you cast a Blasphemous Act, kill a bunch of creatures, get the cost of Blood for the Blood God down to 3 mana, then you cast this to refill your hand and deal a bunch of damage. Seems pretty fine, or Toxic Deluge or Damnation or whatever. There's also some combo potential. We have combos that cause creatures to die repeatedly, like Gravecrawler, Phyrexian Altar. Blood for the Blood God doesn't care about how many different creatures died during the turn, just how many creatures died. So it can be the same Gravecrawler dying 8 different times to get the cost down to 3 mana. So that's another potential home sacrifice style decks where you have combos where you're sacrificing your own board a bunch to get the cost down, then this refills and keeps your combo turn going. As far as specific commanders to make this work, I think it seems good in maybe like Prosh is one example. Prosh, really good at making a bunch of bodies, and it's really good at sacrificing those bodies. So this is a way that you can make a bunch of Prosh tokens, sack those Prosh tokens, then Blood for the Blood God to win. Obviously, if you're playing like Food Chain Prosh or something, some CDH deck, you're probably not going to want this, but in a casual Prosh style deck, or maybe a Korvold style deck, something where you're sacking a bunch of creatures, I can see this being consistent enough to be good. Also, decks that can cheat big spells into play, like Jaliva, for example. You mill this over, cast it for free, or Joda, this is going to be 5 mana, you don't care how many creatures died, or just those control decks where you're casting those Blasphemous Acts or Damnations. So a really, really powerful spell. Just keep in mind, it's going to be inconsistent. You're going to have games where this is the best card in your deck. You're also going to have games where you're going to be really sad because this is sitting in your hand and just not getting that discount and hard to turn on. But being an instant is nice. Even your opponent could be casting the Wrath. Since this is an instant, you can wait for one of your other opponents to cast the Wrath and then cast this with your mana remaining. So I think it's good enough to see play, especially in a deck that's kind of built around having creatures die. We also got a card showing off a new mechanic in Vanguard Suppressor, a 4-mana 3/2 Asteris Warrior with flying and suppressing fire. And it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. The big deal is it has Squad 2. And Squad 2 is essentially the millionth version of Kicker. It's an additional cost to cast a spell. You can pay 2 any number of times, and then you get a token copy of it for every time you paid. So essentially, for 4 mana, you get 1 of these. For 6 mana, you get 2 of them. For 8 mana, you get 3 of them, etc., etc., etc. If you get up to 100 mana, you're going to get, I don't know, some really big number. If you make infinite mana, you can get infinite copies of these. So I think that even though Squad is essentially another twist on Kicker or multi-Kicker, it is a really powerful mechanic. There is a reason that Kicker mechanics keep being made, that they're very beloved and they're very strong and players like playing with them. So as far as what this compares to, a little bit like Sturmgeist, maybe Research Thief, Luzon, there's a bunch of 4 or 5 mana evasive creatures. When you hit your opponent, you draw a card. But of course, the upside is this Squad mechanic, giving you a bunch of copies, which is essentially like multi-Kicker. We've seen this before. Everflowing Chalice. Every time you pay 2, it gets a counter and makes more mana. Or Marshall's Anthem. Every time you pay 2, you get to reanimate another creature. This is essentially the creature token copy version of that mechanic. Also worth mentioning that it works really well with Panharmonicon style effects. Because it's weirdly worded as an ETB trigger, if you have a Panharmonicon or maybe a Yarok out, you're going to pay 2, I don't know, 3 times or something, but then you're going to get twice 3 the number of creatures thanks to the Panharmonicon or Yarok. So that's something to keep in mind. Honestly, I think it should work with Doubling Season. season, but don't quote me on that because, I don't know, I thought Lithiform Engine should work with doubling season, and because of some weird rules quirk, it doesn't. I assume that this one should, so it's another way to double it up. So if you're some sort of weird token style deck, or maybe a Panoramic on Yaros style deck, this really goes up in value. Would I just play in a generic deck? Maybe not, but if you can make infinite mana or a huge amount of mana, or have ways to double up its trigger and make more tokens, then I think that Vanguard Suppressor and the squad mechanic could be really strong. We also got one reprint, and this is actually like a promo that's associated with the Warhammer deck, so you can get from your LGS, and that's Fabricate, which, a pretty good card. Cheap artifact tutor at 3 mana. The flavor, I guess, is pretty Warhammer-y, even though I don't really know Warhammer. So anyway, that's the Warhammer decks, and also the secret lair drops. We should get more info in a couple of months, but coming out in the middle of August, and there's going to be a lot of them. People are wondering, like, how many Warhammer cards will we get? And honestly, 4 commander decks, that's as many new cards, assuming that they're not just reprinting a bunch of stuff in those decks, but they're all new cards. That's as many new cards roughly as like a new standard set or something. So we're gonna actually be a lot of Warhammer cards, and legality wise, legal and commander, of course, also legacy and vintage, but not in modern or standard or anything like that. We also got some info on our return to Double Masters 2022, which has preview starting in June and the set releasing the first week in July. So we got a few cards from the set so far. Liliana the Last Hope coming back, Kozilek, Renin 6, and these are obviously really solid reprints, especially Kozilek and Renin 6. The Eldrazi are up to $70-ish again, so we really needed them to get reprinted. They're pretty popular in Commander. Renin 6, modern staple, also ungodly expensive. Liliana the Last Hope only like $20, but still, $20 is $20. It's better to head off a card like this and print it now, rather than wait until it gets up to $100 like Liliana the Veil before we try to start reprinting it. So even though it's not quite as exciting of an open, still a fine reprint. And then, perhaps even more exciting, we got to see this special treatment for the set. So Wizards is bringing back special etched foil style cards, like we saw in the original Commander Legends, and you can see the special art up there for Liliana and Kozilek and Renin 7, but I really like some of this art, like that Renin 6 looks super clean, Kozilek, Liliana the Last Hope. So these cards probably be even a little bit more expensive than the normal versions, but super excited to see these solid reprints coming because these are cards we definitely need to get cheaper. And then we have a couple of promos from the set. Weathered Wayfarer in Bring to Light. Weathered Wayfarer, probably $15, $12 depending on the printing, so not a bad reprint. Bring to Light, kind of a dud. So you can see the promo versions to the far right. Those are ones you're going to be able to get from your LGS, I believe. But then we have some normal set versions as well. I know every set's got to have some duds. Not super excited that your really expensive booster is going to have like a $1 bulk rare Bring to Light, but really, that happens every set. So I guess we can't complain too much, but it's sweet that there's some decent promos that you could be able to pick up for free as well. We also got a bit of news about Dominaria. So sadly, Wizards didn't show off any new cards from the set, but there's 2 pieces of Dominaria news I wanted to mention. One is we got a release date, the first week in September. So we were thinking end of September, which is when we normally get the fall set, but this one's moved up a bit, which is good because we don't have another set until Dominaria comes out. Wizards also really hinted at this being the Phyrexian set. They didn't say that directly, but they kind of hyped up this big storyline that's coming and Battle for the World and all this stuff. So it's pretty clear that all of this Praetors that we've seen kind of planted through previous sets is all leading to a multi-set story arc with Dominaria fighting against the Phyrexians. The other bit of news that we got is, starting with Dominaria, every set is also going to have a Jumpstart release. So Jumpstart, if you don't know Jumpstart, we've had, what, 2 of them so far? It's a product where you open a booster and open another booster and shuffle them together and just play right out of the pack. Really sweet new player product. And Jumpstart, I think it's a really good product. I especially love the first one, although I will say, little skeptical about doing it every single set. I don't know, I feel like Commander decks, back when we did them once a year, were one of the sweetest products Wizards made. Now that we get Commander decks every single set, they've lost a little bit of their specialness or excitement. I don't know. So maybe that's just me. Hopefully it works out awesomely. And I'm definitely glad to see Jumpstart getting more support because it's a really good product for new players. But I am always a little nervous when a product goes from once every couple years to every single set. That's just so many cards for Wizards to make and keep interesting and keep unbroken. But we'll have to wait and see. Oh yeah, one last bit of news. We also got a new old border but new art Sol Ring promo that you can get if you spend $50 or more at your your local game store, the I Love My Local Game Store promo. So definitely check that out if you want to spend some money on your LGS. You get a really cool card as a reward. Anyway, that brings us to the end of our spoilers for today. So what do you think? How hyped are you for Warhammer 40k? What do you think of the new cards? How good are they? What do you think of that crazy new Cascade Legend? How powerful is that card? All the other stuff. What about Double Masters? Hype level up, down? How do you like the new treatments? Dominaria, what about Jumpstart every set? Are you going to spend 50 bucks a your LGS to get a Soul Ring promo? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed it, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.